So the next thing I wanted to show was a feature called the Turing Lane extension pieces, otherwise known as TuLEPs. And before I do, it might be useful to know that if, for example, you draw an avenue by avenue intersection like so, you'll actually get automatic turning lanes. As you can see, these are a lane for turning right, or if you're using a right-hand drive installation, a lane for turning left as opposed to right. In addition to this, on the road network, slightly different from the avenue, rather than automatically appearing, you need to take the one-way road tool and just place one-way road stubs in the center of the intersections where you would like the road turning lanes to appear. It's possible there, just use the road tool here and you see that will revert them back to the regular intersection types. Now there are a number of puzzle pieces, once again found in the road menu. Here we go, the basic TuLEPs, that enable us to make these manually. So I'll just go through a few of the basic pieces. So the first one here is a transition from road to a road with a turning lane. I use home and end. There's a special piece which is for a T, so essentially where there's no right-hand turn at a junction, you would need to use this piece. Then we have the actual turning lanes themselves. So here we have an A1 and A2. That's basically either one or two arrows. This is purely cosmetic. They both work exactly the same. Here we have one with dashed lines and another with a straight line. Again, just two cosmetic differences. There's a compact transition, so I'll show you how that works briefly. So here's a type A avenue transition. That's to transition to a single turning lane. If I rotate that, this is a B-type avenue transition, and this actually transitions to two additional turning lanes, giving you 6 lanes in total. I'll show you how those work as well slightly later. These are the basic A1, so remember 5-lane avenue pieces. And again, a second set without arrows. These are the B1s, so that's the 6-lane, and again a blank variant. After this we have the intersections, and there are various different intersections to cover all the supported networks. There are then some pieces for interfacing with the rail or ground light rail, that's tram, remember, networks. In addition to something called a slip lane, and we'll go into how to use those later. There's other pieces for interfacing with those as well. Slightly further on, these pieces here, then they transition the TuLEPs to the network widening mod. And lastly, there's a piece here for transitioning with the flexible single point urban interchange, which is part of the real highway network. So how do we put those into practice, you may ask? Well, before I do that, I think I'm just going to delete a couple of these extraneous roads because that won't actually help us. So first off, let's start with that T piece because that's actually quite an important one. So you see the normal transition, just home and end, to switch between that and the T piece. Now if we were to put in a turning lane piece here, you see there's actually no need to turn right at this junction, hence the word T piece is for a T junction. So we have this special piece here, and that just provides 2 lanes running through, basically just adjusts to the geometry of the rest of the turning lanes. Now I'm going to leave a 1 tile gap here from the intersection. Usually this piece would go right up against it, and the reason I'm doing that is I'm going to put a slip lane in here later. But as I said, usually that would go right up against the junction. So we switch now to the transition, and again you can decide which length you want for the turning lanes. So I'm just going to have 2 tiles for the actual turning lanes at this particular point, and I think I'll keep with the 2 tiles here, maybe just 1 at this intersection. So after this, move to our next piece, and we just decide which arrows to put in. As I say, this is purely a cosmetic thing where they have 1 or 2 arrows. Now I would say in a situation like this with the T, 2 arrows make a lot of sense. For most of the other junctions, I would usually just use a single arrow. Where I have a longer junction set up, maybe use as many as 2 of those with a 1 tile gap. Let's see, with the next piece is blank, so that doesn't contain any arrows at all. As I said, you are free to pick whichever configuration you want to use for these. I think that's fairly standardized. I'm just going to put a couple pieces down here while I think about it. So one of those there, one of those, and one of those. And actually, let's say I now decide I want 2 arrows and not 1. See, I can just overplop on the existing piece. I don't need to create a new piece or delete anything. And here I'm going to put in what is called a compact transition, another one in here as well. And you see that's for transitioning between 2 sets of turning lanes. And now I have to find my intersection pieces for these. So this is the basic road turning lane intersection for road-road intersections. And there are 2 pieces here. Because I'm on a 4-way intersection, automatically gives me the 4-way piece correctly. But you can use the arrows shown on the preview of this piece. They're a guide to whether you've got the correct piece in place. So you see correctly at every lane there's the option to go either straight on or left, and then there's a second lane for going right. Now that is how the various parts of the junction are configured, so we know that's the correct piece and will work as intended. On this side we need to rotate until we find the T, and you see the difference with the preview arrows. On the bottom connection, all we have is a straight and a left connection because there is actually nowhere to turn right at that part of the junction. So plop that into place as well, and that's the basic road turning lanes covered there. So now we'll move to setting up the avenue pieces. So once again, on this connection here, you'll see there's no right turn, so we don't need to worry about that one. So first off, we need to get our transition in place. Now here's quite tight between 2 sets of TuLEPs, and there's no compact transition for the avenue network as there is with the road. So I'm going to need to plop 1 piece here. And you see how on the dual tile network of the avenue, I'm plopping on the top of the avenue, not on the bottom. And if I just show you, I plop once on the top here and switch here and once on the bottom. See how, depending on where I plop the piece, it will decide the orientation of that piece itself. Now I'm going to put a row through here that I missed out earlier. We'll need that a little bit later, I imagine. And just try and show you that again. You can see here with the arrows. If I put that on the bottom, you see the arrows are on the top. That's incorrect. But in this situation, that would be right. But for here, that's not right. If I move over to the top, see now the arrows are on the bottom. Just move that twice again, and it changes to the alternate piece. So rather than using home and end, just change between the piece with 2 arrow sets and 1 arrow set by moving left and right. That's actually quite a convenient little tip you might find helpful. So here maybe I'm going to have 2 sets of arrows here as well because it's a 4-way intersection. And then the blank pieces again. And bear in mind again with these on the top and the bottom, the positions will be reversed if you are using a right-hand drive game from what you see here. Now, just need to go back quickly and finish off the road part of this network. So I'm going to need a normal transition once more here. Like so. Give me the wrong pieces there. Okay, fine. So that's all the pieces we need. Now, there was a special T piece for the road network, but with the avenues, there's no requirement for any special piece. Literally, where there's no right turn, just literally do nothing on that segment of the network. So all we have to do is just find the intersection. So for the basic road to avenue intersection, there's a piece here. You see it adjusts again for the T. Now the preview arrow is actually, because I'm using a left-hand drive game for some reason, incorrect, but actually when I plop the piece down, you'll note that that will actually work correctly, so ignore that one. However, with the four-way piece, this is indeed what we would be expecting to see, so I'll plop that into place as well. Just move down here to where we made the intersection before, and instead of the auto turning lanes, I'm going to change that to these turning lanes as well. Now this first intersection piece, and there's a T and a four-way version of this, this is for where you're using the additional single turning lane. The second piece here is for where you're using two additional turning lanes, and there's two different variants to this. So again, using the previews, you see here that every direction has the option for turning right for two lanes. But if I move that around, see it's changed to say it's an A1 B1 intersection now. You see the top and the bottom only have one lane that goes right each, and there's two lanes from left and right. And so this is used when you have a combination of the A and B type pieces. But I'm going to put a BB interchange here. So I need a B1 B1 intersection like so, and just plop that down for use later. Now, eagle-eyed people may notice that I've put a tram network in here, or GLR, and a rail network in here. Now, if you delete one of these TuLEPs, which I'm going to do now, see as I do so, it doesn't just delete the one TuLEP, it deletes the pieces either side of it. So it's a good idea whenever you're making TuLEPs to plan ahead whatever you're going to do. So I want to put a rail crossing through here, like so, and a GLR crossing through here, because there are pieces within the TuLEP menu, as I mentioned before, that can interface with these networks. So let's get those in place and just show you how those work. This is the road GLR piece. See, I just put that the wrong way around. That's better. And then there's pieces for the avenue, and you see with the avenue ones, there's the option for both avenue or turning lane avenue 5, and that's a network widening mod network. We haven't gone into that quite yet, so I'm just going to make sure we use the avenue one for now, and I believe that's the correct orientation. And now what I'm going to have to do is put the rest of the pieces back once more. So there's our transition and our turning arrows. Just going to change that so there's two arrows there, and put the road pieces back in as well. So I'm making a bit of a mess of this. There we go. So now everything's back in and timing working correctly. And as you can see, we have a rail connection here and a GLR connection here. Now it's important to note that the rail and GLR network has to be in place before you put the TuLEP piece on top of it. It won't work. You can't drag the rail or GLR or any other network into a puzzle piece. Usually the network has to be there and the puzzle piece plopped on top of it. And so because when you delete one of these pieces, it's quite a pain to get everything back. And so it's always good to know what you're doing in advance. We move back now to this big junction here, and I just want to show you the different type of avenue TuLEPs. So from here, I'm going to want to change into these 6-lane turning lanes, and so we'll use these slightly different B1 pieces here. Let's very quickly finish that off. And as you can see, this is actually one of the most efficient, highest capacity interchanges you can have with the TuLEPs. And what I'm doing is I'm just hovering over the intersection now with the bulldoze tool, and you can do that to see once more the arrow configurations, and you can see that each of these segments of the junction have the correct number of turning lanes on these arrows, so we know that everything is correct and will work. So lastly, I just want to show you the slip lane piece that I said I would put in here at the beginning. So what is a slip lane? Well, essentially, if I plot that down there, it should give you an idea. It allows traffic from here to turn left without actually going through the junction. And we could, if we wanted to, have a slip lane here on this intersection. We could have 4 slip lanes. The only restriction within the TuLEPs, you can't have a slip lane on these B1 pieces, but you can on the Avenue A1s as well. Having got the slip lane into place, you need to find the appropriate network interfaces. So assuming you had a road without any turning lane pieces, this would be the piece you would use. And there's a dual version of which, in case you have slip lanes on either side. Similar for one-way road and avenue, and I'll just show the avenue one because you see it's only covering one tile. Just would overplop here. We were using that. Here's the one we want to use for the road TuLEPs, like so. You see this doesn't have any arrows on it, but that won't affect the functionality here. That's that special piece just for the T-end. So if we weren't using this slip lane piece, this piece here would need to be right up against the junction. It's very important to remember that. And there are, of course, alternative pieces for the various other connections. So there you have the turning lane extension pieces. That's all for part 3 of the NAM tutorial series. And in part 4, I will begin with some of the starter piece based networks, such as the network widening mod, which I've mentioned already, and the street add-on mod. Hope you'll join me for part 4.